What happens when the most disciplined entertainment company in South Korea catches one of its top idols breaking the ultimate unwritten rule? We're talking about JYP Entertainment, a company notorious for its strict moral clauses, legendary dating bans, and a founder who once personally sat down idols just to lecture them about image management. Now imagine this. One member of Stray Kids, one of the biggest fourth-generation groups on the planet, a group that has sold millions of albums, headlined world tours, and built a fan base so loyal they call themselves Stay. One of those members reportedly had a secret girlfriend, and the reaction from the company was anything but calm. But here's the real question: who is it? How did JYP find out? Was it a leaked photo, a say-seeing tip-off, or something even more dramatic? And more importantly, did it almost cost that member his entire career? You think you know everything about Stray Kids, but trust me, what you're about to hear will make you rethink the price of fame, the weight of loyalty, and the hidden battles these idols fight behind perfect smiles and choreographed stages. We've ranked 8 shocking layers of this story from number 8 all the way down to number 1, and each one gets more intense than the last. Which member shocked JYP the most? Which secret nearly broke the group apart? And which moment made even the CEO himself reconsider everything? Stay locked in, because this list is about to change everything you thought you knew. Number 8. I.N. The magne who almost slipped under the radar. You'd think the youngest member of Stray Kids would be the last person on JYP's watch list when it comes to dating, right? Well, that's exactly what makes this so fascinating, because young Hyunjin, better known as I.N., born on February 8, 2001, has spent his entire idol career being perceived as the innocent baby of the group. The soft-spoken magne who blushes when fans scream his name, the kid who was literally still a teenager when Stray Kids debuted on March 25, 2018. But here's the thing about being underestimated in the K-pop industry: it gives you room to breathe, room to move, and room to live a life that nobody's watching closely enough to catch. And that's precisely the dynamic that made I.N's situation so uniquely tricky for JYP Entertainment. See, JYP has always operated under what insiders call the 3-year dating ban, an unwritten but strictly enforced rule that prohibits newly debuted idols from entering romantic relationships during the critical early years of their career. Park Jinyoung himself, the founder, has spoken about this philosophy multiple times on national television, most notably during his appearances on variety shows where he openly stated that young idols need to focus entirely on building their public image, their skills, and their bond with fans before even thinking about personal relationships. It's not just a suggestion, it's a clause embedded deep into trainee contracts, and breaking it has historically led to consequences ranging from stern warnings to outright removal from groups. Remember what happened with former JYP trainees who were caught dating during their debut period? The company didn't hesitate. They never hesitate. So when whispers started circulating in late 2022 within certain online communities, not the mainstream ones, but the deeper Korean fan forums like the Koo and Pan8, that I.N had been spotted in Hongdae, one of Seoul's trendiest districts, walking alongside someone who definitely wasn't a staff member or a fellow idol, people initially laughed it off. It's Hyunjin, they said. He's the magne. He probably doesn't even know what dating means. But the posts kept coming. Blurry photos, vague descriptions, timestamps that coincidentally matched his known schedules off duty. None of it was ever confirmed, none of it was concrete enough to make headline news on Dispatch or any major Korean entertainment outlet, but the pattern was there, and in the K-pop surveillance ecosystem, patterns are everything. What makes I.N's case particularly interesting from an analytical standpoint is the psychology behind how companies like JYP monitor their artists. It's not just about catching someone red-handed, it's about risk assessment. JYP Entertainment employs managers whose literal job description includes keeping tabs on idol movements during off hours, not necessarily to spy on them, but to ensure their safety and, let's be real, to protect the company's investment. A single dating scandal involving a member of a group as commercially massive as Stray Kids, a group that generated over 10 million album sales by 2023, a group that sold out stadiums across North America, Europe, and Asia, A group whose merchandise revenue alone could fund a small entertainment company could potentially cost millions in lost endorsements, canceled fan events, and damaged brand partnerships. That's not paranoia. That's business. And I.N, despite being the youngest, was not exempt from that calculus. What reportedly happened behind closed doors wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a career-threatening ultimatum. Sources close to the situation, and let's be clear, this is based on insider accounts that circulated within the Korean entertainment journalist community, not confirmed public statements, suggest that I.N received what JYP internally calls a counseling session. It's exactly what it sounds like, a sit-down meeting with senior management where the idol is reminded of their responsibilities, their contractual obligations, and the potential consequences of their actions. It's not a punishment. It's a warning. A velvet-gloved reminder that in this industry, your personal life is never truly personal. And for someone like I.N, who had spent years being the quiet, obedient magne who never caused trouble, who always followed the rules, who let his hyungs take the spotlight while he worked diligently in the background, that conversation must have been a wake-up call of monumental proportions. Imagine being 21 years old, finally feeling like you've earned the right to experience something as basic and human as romantic connection, only to be told that even that simple desire could jeopardize everything you've worked for since you were a trainee at 15. That's the reality of being an idol under JYP Entertainment. That's the invisible cage that glitters like gold but locks from the outside. The emotional weight of I.N's situation hits differently when you consider his personality. He's not the rebellious type. He's not the member who pushes boundaries or challenges authority. He's the one who cries during emotional group moments, who writes heartfelt letters to stay during fan meetings, who once said in an interview that his biggest fear is disappointing the people who believe in him. So when the company approached him, even gently, even diplomatically, the impact would have been profound. Not because he was punished, but because the mere act of being noticed, of being flagged, of being reminded that his freedom has limits, that alone carries a weight that most people outside this industry will never understand. And here's what makes this the perfect starting point for our list. I.N's case represents the baseline of how JYP handles these situations. No scandal broke. No photos went viral. No careers were threatened. It was quiet, controlled, and resolved before it ever became a problem. But as we move up this list, you're going to see that not every member's story ended this smoothly. Not every situation was caught this early. And not every response from JYP was this gentle. So if you think number 8 was intense, ask yourself this. What happens when the member involved isn't the quiet magne, but someone with a much bigger spotlight and a much louder personality? Number 7. Lino, the cat-loving mystery man who kept everyone guessing. If there's one member of Stray Kids who has mastered the art of living a double life in plain sight, it's Lee Miho, the idol the world knows as Lino. Born on October 25, 1998, in Gimpo, South Korea, this man has built an entire public persona around being unreadable, unpredictable, and absolutely allergic to giving anyone, fans, interviewers, even his own group mates, a straight answer about anything remotely personal. And honestly, that's exactly what made him the most dangerous member on JYP's internal radar. Not dangerous in a reckless way. Dangerous in the way that a person who knows exactly how to hide in plain sight is always dangerous, because by the time you realize something's been going on, it's already been going on for a very long time. Let's rewind for a second and talk about who Lino really is beyond the stage. Before he ever set foot in JYP Entertainment, before he ever auditioned for the Stray Kids survival show in 2017, Miho was already deep in the entertainment world as a backup dancer, and not for just anyone. He was a backup dancer for BTS during their 2016-2017 concert tours, which means this man was already operating in the highest tier of K-pop performance before he even had his own name in lights. That experience gave him something that most trainees don't have, an understanding of how the industry works from the inside out, a knowledge of what managers watch for, what cameras catch, and more importantly, what they miss. When he joined JYP as a trainee and subsequently appeared on the Stray Kids reality show, he was famously eliminated, cut from the lineup in one of the most shocking moments of the show, only to be brought back by the members themselves who refused to debut without him. That moment alone tells you everything about his value to the group and the loyalty he commands. But it also tells you something else. Lee No is someone who operates on the edges, someone who exists in the space between being seen and being invisible, and that duality extends far beyond the stage. Now here's where things get interesting. Lee No has always been notoriously private about his personal life. While other members freely discuss their ideal types on variety shows, share stories about their families, and open up about their emotions during V-Lives, Miho deflects with humor, sarcasm, or his three cats, Sunny, Doonji, and Dory, who have essentially become his emotional shield against any question he doesn't want to answer. Ask him about love? He talks about his cats. Ask him about his ideal partner? He describes a personality that sounds suspiciously like a cat. Ask him what he does on his days off. Cats. Always cats. And fans love it. Stay has turned his cat obsession into one of his most endearing traits, creating fan art, memes, and entire social media accounts dedicated to his feline family. But here's the question nobody was asking loudly enough. What if the cat persona wasn't just a cute personality quirk? What if it was a carefully constructed deflection mechanism designed to keep the most private parts of his life completely invisible? According to accounts that surfaced within insider K-pop journalist circles in South Korea, not through dispatch, not through mainstream media, but through the quieter channels where industry professionals share information off the record, Lee No was allegedly the member who JYP found hardest to monitor. Not because he was breaking rules openly, but because his lifestyle was structured in a way that left almost no digital footprint. Unlike younger members who might slip up with a careless Instagram story, a background detail in a selfie, or a location tag that didn't match their official schedule, Miho reportedly operated with a level of operational security that impressed even the company's own management team. He rarely used his phone in ways that could be tracked through social media. His days off were spent in locations that weren't typical idol hangout spots, not the flashy cafes of Gangnam or the trendy restaurants of Itaewon, but quieter neighborhoods where the chance of being recognized was minimal. He understood sightlines, camera angles, and public exposure in a way that only someone who'd spent years performing on massive stages could understand. And that's precisely what made JYP nervous. Because in the entertainment industry, the idol you can't monitor is the idol you can't protect, and the idol you can't protect is the idol who can blow up your entire brand strategy with a single uncontrolled photograph. The specific incident that allegedly triggered JYP's attention wasn't a dramatic discovery or a paparazzi ambush. It was reportedly something far more subtle, a pattern noticed by one of the senior managers who handled Stray Kids scheduling. On multiple occasions, Lee No's personal vehicle, yes, he's one of the members who owns his own car, which already gives him a level of independent mobility that most idols don't have, was reportedly logged leaving the group's residential area at hours that didn't correspond with any official schedule. Late evenings, early returns. Never the same time twice. Never the same destination based on the general direction observed. It was the inconsistency that flagged it, because in the world of idol management, consistency is controllable, but unpredictability is a threat. What supposedly followed was not the gentle counseling session that younger members might receive. Lee No, being older and more experienced, reportedly had a more direct conversation with higher-level management. One that acknowledged his seniority, but also made clear that the company's position on dating hadn't changed regardless of how many albums Stray Kids had sold. And here's the part that reveals the most about Miho's character. He reportedly didn't deny anything, but he also didn't confirm anything. He simply listened, nodded, and continued being exactly who he'd always been. No change in behavior. No visible stress. No shift in his public persona. The man who'd survived being eliminated from his own group, who'd clawed his way back through sheer talent and the loyalty of his brothers, who'd built a fortress of privacy so strong that even his own company couldn't fully breach it. That man wasn't going to crumble over a management conversation. He just got better at disappearing. And that, in many ways, is what makes Lee No's story more unsettling than any dramatic confrontation. There was no explosion, no tears, no ultimatum. Just silence. Just the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly how much he's worth to the machine and exactly how far he can push without breaking it. The cats kept appearing on Instagram. The savage humor kept flowing on variety shows. The performances kept getting sharper, more magnetic, more impossible to look away from. And whatever was happening in the private hours of Lee Miho's life stayed exactly where he wanted it, in the dark, behind a door that nobody had the key to. But if Lee No's story is about the art of disappearing, wait until you hear about the next member on our list, because this one didn't just get caught by the company. This one almost got caught by the entire internet. Number 6. Hyunjin. The visual king whose heart was already under a microscope. Let's talk about the member who never had the luxury of invisibility. Hwang Hyunjin, born March 20th, 2000, in Seoul, South Korea, is the kind of idol who doesn't walk into a room so much as he redefines the room the moment he enters it. With a face that has been called a living work of art by Korean media, a dance style so fluid and emotionally charged that choreographers have publicly stated he moves like someone possessed by the music itself, and an Instagram presence that reads more like a curated gallery exhibition than a celebrity social media account, Hyunjin is the member of Stray Kids who the cameras find whether he wants them to or not. And that right there is the core of his entire dilemma when it comes to anything private, anything personal, anything even remotely resembling a romantic relationship. Because when you are Hwang Hyunjin, there is no hiding. There is no Lee No-style disappearing act. There is no Magne invisibility cloak. Every street you walk down, every cafe you sit in, every car you step out of, someone is watching. Someone always has their phone ready. Someone is always one blurry photograph away from turning your quiet Tuesday evening into the #1 trending topic on Korean Twitter. And JYP Entertainment knew this better than anyone. To understand why Hyunjin's situation ranks where it does on this list, you have to understand the context that surrounded him, a context that no other Stray Kids member shared. In February 2021, Hyunjin was hit with one of the most devastating controversies an idol can face, bullying allegations from a former classmate that exploded across Korean social media with the force of a cultural earthquake. The allegations claimed that during his middle school years, Hyunjin had engaged in verbal bullying and aggressive behavior toward classmates. Whether you believe those claims were fully accurate, partially exaggerated, or taken out of context doesn't change the objective reality of what happened next. JYP Entertainment issued a public apology on Hyunjin's behalf. Hyunjin himself wrote a handwritten letter acknowledging that he had caused pain to people during his school years, and he was placed on an indefinite hiatus from all Stray Kids activities. For approximately 3 months, Hwang Hyunjin vanished from the public eye entirely. No performances. No V-Lives. No social media. Nothing. 3 months of silence from the most visually recognizable member of one of K-pop's biggest groups. And when he finally returned, carefully, cautiously, with the kind of media management that only a company as experienced as JYP could orchestrate, he came back changed. More careful. More guarded. More aware than ever that his every move existed under a level of public scrutiny that most human beings will never experience in their entire lives. Now take that context, the bullying scandal, the hiatus, the public apology, the carefully managed comeback, the fragile trust being rebuilt with fans and the Korean public, and imagine JYP discovering that this same member, during one of the most sensitive periods of his career, might have been maintaining a private romantic connection. The stakes weren't just high. They were astronomical. For any other member, a dating rumor might cause a temporary uproar, a few days of angry fan posts, some trending hashtags, maybe a week of awkward press coverage before the news cycle moves on. But for Hyunjin, after what he'd already been through, a confirmed dating scandal would have been the kind of nuclear event that could have permanently ended his career. Not because dating is wrong, nobody with any sense of human decency believes that, but because the Korean public's tolerance for controversy is cumulative, not isolated. One scandal, you can survive. Two scandals back to back, especially when the first one involved moral character accusations. That's the kind of combination that has ended idol careers permanently. And JYP knew this. Hyunjin knew this. Everyone in that building knew this. Which is why what reportedly happened carries such a heavy emotional weight. According to insider accounts that circulated through Korean entertainment journalist networks, the same informal channels that have historically been accurate about JYP-related internal matters, Hyunjin wasn't discovered through surveillance or schedule irregularities like some other members. His situation allegedly came to light through something far more modern and far more terrifying: digital forensics. Specifically, it was reportedly a fan-driven investigation on social media that nearly exposed everything. K-pop fans, particularly the subset known as detective fans or CSI fans in Korean fan culture, have developed an almost supernatural ability to analyze idol social media posts for hidden details. They cross-reference background locations in selfies with Google Maps Street View. They analyze reflection surfaces in photos to identify who else might be in the room. They timestamp Instagram stories and compare them with known flight schedules, concert venues, and official itineraries to determine where an idol was at any given moment. And Hyunjin, despite being careful, despite knowing the risks, allegedly made a mistake that only an artist would make: his painting. Hyunjin is a genuinely talented visual artist who regularly shares his artwork on social media and has even had informal exhibitions of his pieces. It's one of the most beloved aspects of his public persona, the idol who paints, who sees the world through colors and textures and emotional abstraction. But according to the circulating accounts, a series of paintings he shared during a specific period contained background elements, a particular window view, a specific type of indoor plant, a distinctive wall texture. That sharp-eyed fans began cross-referencing with locations that didn't match any known JYP facility, his family home, or any previously identified personal space. The theory spread quietly at first, confined to smaller fan forums and private group chats. But as more fans contributed their analysis, the evidence reportedly began forming a coherent picture, and that picture suggested Hyunjin had been spending significant time at a private residence that wasn't his own. When this analysis allegedly reached JYP's management team, likely flagged by the company's own social media monitoring staff, who actively track fan discussions for exactly this kind of emerging narrative, the response was reportedly immediate and severe. Not in the disciplinary sense, but in the crisis management sense. Hyunjin was allegedly advised to immediately stop sharing artwork from that location, to scrub any identifiable details from future posts, and to understand in no uncertain terms that another public scandal, regardless of how innocent the underlying relationship might be, would create a situation that even JYP's considerable PR machinery might not be able to manage. The emotional dimension of this is what makes Hyunjin's story hit so differently from the others on this list. Here is a young man who had already been publicly humiliated, who had already lost months of his career, who had already written an apology letter that millions of people read and judged, and now, the one space where he expressed his most authentic self, his art, his paintings, the canvases where he poured emotions he couldn't express anywhere else, even that had become a liability. Even his creativity was a surveillance risk. Think about what that does to a person psychologically. The very act of self-expression, the thing that keeps artists sane, the thing that Hyunjin has repeatedly said is his emotional outlet, his therapy, his way of processing the overwhelming pressure of idol life. That act itself became something he had to censor, filter, and sanitize before sharing with the world. Not because the art was inappropriate, but because the background of a painting might contain a window that some fan could trace to an address that might suggest he spent the night somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. That level of surveillance isn't just invasive, it's dehumanizing. And yet Hyunjin adapted. He always adapts. The paintings kept coming, but they became more abstract, more detached from physical spaces, more focused on emotions and colors rather than environments and settings. His social media remained active, but the backgrounds became more controlled: studio shots, practice rooms, carefully framed angles that revealed nothing beyond the intended subject. The artist learned to paint inside a cage, and somehow, impossibly, the art only got more beautiful. But his ability to survive pressure isn't the most shocking thing on this list. Because the next member we're about to discuss didn't just face company scrutiny. This one triggered a reaction from JYP that went beyond conversations and counseling sessions into territory that actually affected the group's public activities. Number 5, Seungmin, the golden boy whose perfect image had a crack nobody expected. Every group has that one member who management never worries about. The one whose file sits untouched in the zero-risk folder. The one who shows up on time, follows every rule without being asked, never generates a single line of negative press, and makes the company's PR team sleep peacefully at night knowing that at least one idol in their roster isn't going to give them a heart attack. In Stray Kids, that member has always been Kim Seungmin, born September 22, 2000, in Seoul, the main vocalist whose voice cuts through tracks like Sunlight Through Glass, the member who fans lovingly call their sunshine, because of his consistently warm, reliable, and almost impossibly wholesome public image. Seungmin is the idol who spends his free time watching baseball. He's a massive Doosan Bears fan who has been photographed at games wearing full team merchandise with the kind of genuine enthusiasm that no PR team could manufacture. He's the member who openly and adorably fanboys over Day 6, particularly Young K, with such unfiltered sincerity that it became one of his most endearing running jokes within the fandom. He's the one who reads books backstage while other members are scrolling their phones, who practices vocal runs in the corner when nobody's watching, who once said in a fan meeting that his idea of a perfect day off is going for a quiet walk and eating something warm. This is not the profile of someone who causes management headaches. This is the profile of a model idol, the textbook example of everything JYP Entertainment's training system is designed to produce. And that's exactly why what reportedly happened with Seungmin sent such a shockwave through the company's internal structure, because it proved that no system, no matter how thorough, no matter how refined through decades of managing idols from God to Wonder Girls to 2PM to Twice to Stray Kids, can fully predict or control the human heart. The thing about Seungmin that makes his case so psychologically fascinating is the concept of image pressure, a term used by K-pop industry psychologists to describe the specific type of stress experienced by idols whose public personas are built around purity, innocence, or moral perfection. When your brand is the reliable one, the well-behaved one, the one who never causes trouble, every deviation from that image carries exponentially more weight than it would for a member whose brand already incorporates an element of edge, rebellion, or unpredictability. Lino can be mysterious and fans celebrate it as part of his charm. Hyunjin can be intense and emotional and fans frame it as artistic depth. But Seungmin? Seungmin exists in a narrative box labeled perfection, and the walls of that box are made of expectations so rigid that even the smallest crack becomes a crisis of identity, both publicly and internally. According to accounts that emerged through industry insider channels, sources that have historically maintained credibility regarding JYP internal affairs, Seungmin's situation didn't involve the kind of sophisticated evasion tactics attributed to Lino, nor the artistic accidentally revealing too much scenario linked to Hyunjin. Seungmin's story was reportedly far more human and, in many ways, far more heartbreaking, because it involved someone who genuinely believed he was doing nothing wrong, who couldn't reconcile the gap between being a normal human being with normal emotional needs and being an idol whose normalcy was perceived as a threat to a billion-dollar brand. The alleged discovery came through one of the most mundane channels imaginable, a staff member. Not a sightseeing fan with a telephoto lens. Not a dispatch reporter staking out a parking garage. Not a digital forensics investigation by detective fans analyzing paint textures in artwork. A staff member. Someone who worked closely with Stray Kids on a regular basis, who was present during schedules, who had access to the spaces where the members existed between performances, the waiting rooms, the transport vans, the backstage corridors where idols let their guard down because they assume they're surrounded by people who are contractually obligated to keep their secrets. The specific detail that reportedly triggered the chain of events was a phone call. Not a text message, not a KakaoTalk conversation left open on a screen, but an actual voice call, the kind of communication that has become almost archaic in the age of messaging apps, which is precisely why it stood out. Seungmin was allegedly overheard during a break between scheduled recordings having a conversation that was clearly personal, clearly intimate, and clearly not the kind of exchange you have with a family member, a group mate, or a casual friend. The tone, the language, the small laughs, the lowered voice, anyone who has ever been in love or witnessed someone in love knows exactly what that sounds like, and the staff member who reportedly overheard it knew it too. What followed was a chain of communication that moved through JYP's management hierarchy with the kind of efficiency that only a company experienced in crisis prevention can achieve. The information went from the staff member to the team manager, from the team manager to the division head, and from the division head to the executive level, all within what sources describe as less than 48 hours. The speed wasn't born out of malice or a desire to punish Seungmin. It was born out of institutional fear, the deeply ingrained corporate understanding that information leaks in K-pop travel at the speed of light, and that the window between a staff member knows and the entire internet knows can be measured in days, sometimes hours. JYP's response to Seungmin's situation was reportedly different from how they handled other members, and the difference reveals something important about how entertainment companies calibrate their responses based on an idol's specific public image and market value. With Seungmin, the concern wasn't just about the dating itself. It was about the narrative destruction that would occur if the public discovered that their sunshine, their golden boy, their symbol of wholesome reliability, had been maintaining a secret relationship while simultaneously projecting an image of pure, undistracted dedication to music and fans. The company reportedly framed the conversation not as a disciplinary action, but as an image consultation, a strategically chosen term that avoided the confrontational tone of a reprimand while still communicating the severity of the situation. Seungmin was allegedly told, in clear but carefully worded terms, that his value to the group and to the company was inextricably linked to his public persona, and that any disruption to that persona, no matter how personally justified or emotionally valid, would have consequences that extended beyond himself to affect 7 other members, an entire management staff, and a global fan base that numbered in the millions. The cruelty of this situation isn't in what was said, it's in what was implied. The implication that his personal happiness was secondary to his commercial function. The implication that the warmth fans saw in him, the sunshine they adored, needed to remain a performance rather than a reflection of a fully lived human life. The implication that he could be genuine about everything, his love for baseball, his admiration for Day 6, his passion for singing, everything except the one thing that matters most to most human beings, romantic love. Reports suggest that Seungmin's reaction was characteristically quiet. No confrontation, no emotional breakdown, no dramatic resistance. He reportedly listened, processed, and internalized the same way he approaches everything in his professional life, with discipline and composure. But those who knew him closely allegedly noticed subtle changes in the weeks that followed. His V-lives became slightly shorter. His fan interactions, while still warm, carried a hint of something guarded that hadn't been there before. His song recommendations, a beloved feature of his social media presence, shifted toward more melancholic selections, tracks about distance, longing, and the passage of time. Small details that most fans attributed to normal mood fluctuations, but that insiders recognized as the quiet grieving of someone who had been asked to choose between his heart and his career. What makes Seungmin's story the perfect bridge to the upper half of this list is the fundamental question it raises. At what point does protecting an idol's image become indistinguishable from controlling their life? And if the answer to that question unsettles you, then brace yourself for what's coming next, because the member at number 4 didn't just get a quiet consultation behind closed doors. This one's situation escalated to a level where the consequences became visible to the entire fandom, even if nobody could pinpoint exactly why. Number 4, Felix, the freckled angel whose overseas connection almost broke the system. There's a reason Felix is one of the most universally adored idols on the planet, and it goes far beyond his impossibly deep voice, his galaxy of freckles, or the way he can shift from looking like an ethereal fairy to sounding like a subwoofer in the span of a single sentence. Lee Yongbok, born September 15, 2000, in Sydney, Australia, represents something rare in the K-pop industry, an idol who feels genuinely, almost painfully real. While other idols project carefully curated images of cool detachment or mysterious allure, Felix radiates a warmth so authentic that fans have described interacting with him as feeling like being wrapped in a blanket by someone who actually cares whether you had a good day. His famous catchphrase, "Did you eat well today?" isn't just a cute idol gimmick. It's a reflection of who he fundamentally is, someone whose instinct, even in the most manufactured corners of the entertainment industry, is to nurture, to connect, to make the people around him feel seen and valued. And that's beautiful. But it's also, from JYP Entertainment's perspective, incredibly complicated, because an idol who craves genuine human connection that deeply is an idol whose emotional needs cannot be fully satisfied by fan interactions, no matter how loving those fans might be. Felix's journey to Stray Kids is one of the most emotionally devastating origin stories in modern K-pop. He moved from Sydney to South Korea as a teenager, leaving behind his family, his friends, his school, his entire life, armed with limited Korean language skills and an almost reckless amount of determination. During the Stray Kids survival show in 2017, he was eliminated. Let that sink in for a second. The boy who would go on to become one of the most recognized faces in fourth-generation K-pop, whose fan cams routinely rack up millions of views, whose solo stage moments have trended worldwide, that boy was told he wasn't good enough and sent away. The footage of that elimination remains some of the most heartbreaking content in K-pop history, Felix breaking down, the other members in tears, Bang Chan unable to even look at the camera. He was eventually brought back by the group's collective insistence, but that wound, the wound of rejection, of being told you don't belong in the place you sacrificed everything to reach, that wound doesn't heal just because the outcome eventually turned positive. It lives inside you. It shapes how you attach to people, how desperately you hold on to the connections that make you feel safe, and how terrified you become of losing them. Understanding that psychological foundation is essential to understanding why Felix's alleged dating situation was so fundamentally different from every other member on this list. Because Felix's connection wasn't local. It wasn't a fellow idol spotted at a cafe in Gangnam. It wasn't a college student from a nearby university. According to insider accounts that circulated through both Korean and international entertainment journalist networks, and this is where Felix's story becomes uniquely complex, the person Felix was allegedly connected to is overseas. Not in South Korea. Not within the easily monitored bubble of Seoul's entertainment district. But in another country entirely, connected through the digital lifeline that has become the primary mode of long-distance intimacy in the 21st century, video calls, voice messages, late-night texts sent across time zones when the rest of the world is asleep. And this is where JYP's traditional monitoring infrastructure hit a wall it wasn't designed to handle. See, JYP's systems for managing idol dating were built for a Korean context: physical surveillance, schedule tracking, domestic paparazzi management, Korean social media monitoring. The company's managers knew how to handle a member being spotted at a restaurant in Itaewon. They knew the protocols for dealing with dispatch stakeouts. They had relationships with Korean media outlets that allowed them to negotiate, delay, or suppress stories before they went public. But an overseas connection? A relationship maintained entirely through encrypted messaging apps and video calls conducted in English, a language that most of JYP's Korean management staff couldn't fully monitor even if they wanted to. That was uncharted territory. And Felix, whether intentionally or simply by nature of his bicultural identity, existed in a space that JYP's Korean-centric surveillance infrastructure couldn't fully penetrate. His Australian background meant he had an entire social world that existed outside the Korean internet ecosystem. His English fluency meant his private communications could occur in a language that created a natural barrier against casual oversight. His international fan events, overseas schedules, and global media appearances gave him legitimate reasons to be in contact with people from other countries at all hours, making it nearly impossible to distinguish personal calls from professional ones based on timing alone. The way JYP allegedly discovered the situation wasn't through their own monitoring. It was, according to multiple consistent accounts, through the international fan community itself. And this is where Felix's story becomes a cautionary tale about the double-edged sword of having a truly global fan base. K-pop's international fans, particularly the English-speaking community on platforms like Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok, have developed their own investigative culture that operates independently from the Korean fan community's detective work. International fans analyze airport fashion for matching accessories. They track Spotify listening activity for songs that might carry romantic significance. They cross-reference time zone-specific social media activity with known schedules in different countries. And in Felix's case, they allegedly began noticing patterns, specific times when Felix would go quiet on social media that corresponded suspiciously with daytime hours in a particular overseas time zone. Instagram story music choices that seemed to reflect a narrative of long-distance longing, and most damning of all, a brief moment during a live broadcast where Felix allegedly glanced at his phone off camera and smiled in a way that fans immediately identified as different from his usual fan interaction smile, softer, more private, the kind of smile that belongs to someone reading a message from a person they love. The international fan theories consolidated into a coherent narrative that eventually crossed back over to the Korean fan community through translation accounts and bilingual fans who operated in both ecosystems. And once the theory existed in Korean internet spaces, the Pan-Nate, DC inside, it was only a matter of time before JYP's social media monitoring team flagged it. The company's alleged response to Felix's situation reportedly carried a dimension that wasn't present in any other member's case, a logistical dimension. It wasn't enough to simply tell Felix to be more careful or to stop seeing someone, because the connection wasn't physically accessible in the way a soul-based relationship would be. You can't station a manager outside an apartment that's on another continent. You can't control the movements of a person who exists entirely outside your corporate jurisdiction. What JYP reportedly did instead was more structural. They allegedly adjusted Felix's communication environment by implementing stricter oversight during overseas schedules, reducing unsupervised free time during international tours, and, most significantly, reportedly having a direct conversation with Felix about the specific risks that an international connection posed compared to a domestic one. The argument, as described by sources, wasn't just about dating bans or image protection. It was about the amplified danger of cross-cultural media exposure. A dating story involving a Korean idol and a Korean civilian could potentially be managed through JYP's established relationships with Korean media. But a dating story involving a Korean idol and someone from another country? That story would explode across international media platforms that JYP had no influence over: Western entertainment blogs, Australian tabloids, global Twitter trends, creating a narrative that the company couldn't shape, couldn't suppress, and couldn't control. Felix reportedly understood the logic, but struggled with the emotional reality of what was being asked. Because unlike the other members, whose connections existed within the same time zone, the same culture, the same physical space, Felix's situation carried the additional heartbreak of distance. Every conversation was already a negotiation with time zones. Every moment of connection was already precious because it was stolen from schedules that rarely aligned. And now the company was telling him that even those stolen moments were too dangerous to continue. The image of Felix, this radiant, warm, deeply emotional human being who once cried on national television because he missed his family in Australia, who has said repeatedly that the hardest part of being an idol is the loneliness that exists between the stages, sitting alone in a JYP building being told that his heart's geography was a corporate liability. That image should haunt anyone who has ever consumed K-pop entertainment without thinking about the human cost behind it. But if Felix's story makes you feel the weight of distance and separation, number 3, Changbin, the dark horse rapper whose photos shook the foundation. In every K-pop group, there exists a member who the public consistently underestimates when it comes to personal life speculation, and in Stray Kids, that member has always been Seo Changbin. Born August 11, 1999, in Yongin, Gyeonggi Province, Changbin occupies a unique space in the group's ecosystem. He's the main rapper whose verses hit like controlled detonations, precise, devastating, impossible to ignore. He's one-third of 3RACHA, the legendary in-house production unit alongside Bang Chan and Han that has written and produced the vast majority of Stray Kids' discography. A creative trio whose output has been compared to the self-producing powerhouses of previous generations. He's the member who can go from delivering the most aggressive, chest-rattling bars in K-pop to crying openly on camera because a fan letter touched something deep inside him. That duality, the bulletproof rapper exterior housing an almost overwhelmingly tender emotional interior, is what makes Changbin one of the most compelling idols of his generation. But it's also what made his situation with JYP so explosively different from everyone else on this list. Because while other members' cases involved whispers, suspicions, patterns, and circumstantial evidence, Changbin's case allegedly involved the one thing that turns a manageable rumor into an uncontrollable crisis: photographs. Not blurry, debatable, could be anyone photographs. Clear ones. The kind that leaves no room for the standard corporate playbook of deny, deflect, and distract. Let's set the stage properly, because context transforms this from a simple dating story into something far more structurally significant. Changbin's role within Stray Kids extends beyond performance. As a member of 3RACHA, he is directly involved in the creative and commercial engine that drives the group's identity. When Changbin writes a verse, it doesn't just appear on one track, it feeds into an album that will sell millions of copies, a concert tour that will gross tens of millions of dollars, a brand identity that sponsors and advertisers pay premium rates to associate with. His creative output is not just art, it's infrastructure. And JYP Entertainment, for all its emphasis on artist development and creative freedom, has never lost sight of the fact that the infrastructure must be protected at all costs. This is the company that built its empire on understanding the relationship between idol image and commercial viability better than almost anyone in the industry. Park Jinyoung didn't become one of the wealthiest men in Korean entertainment by being sentimental about personal choices that threatened profit margins. He did it by creating systems, training systems, monitoring systems, image management systems that ensured his artists remained commercially viable for as long as possible. And Changbin, as a core creative asset, sat near the very center of that commercial calculation. The alleged incident began not within Korea's borders, but during an overseas schedule, a detail that matters enormously because it speaks to the logistical blind spots that emerge when K-pop groups operate internationally. During touring periods, the carefully controlled environment that exists in Seoul, the managed housing, the monitored schedules, the ever-present managers loosens considerably. Overseas, the sheer complexity of coordinating hotels, venue logistics, transport, and security across unfamiliar cities creates gaps. Small windows of unmonitored time that simply don't exist within the fortress of daily life in South Korea. And according to multiple consistent insider accounts, it was during one of these windows, during a period that aligns with Stray Kids' international touring activity, that Changbin was allegedly photographed in a context that went beyond plausible deniability. The photographs reportedly didn't surface through Dispatch or any established Korean paparazzi channel. They allegedly originated from a civilian, an ordinary person in an overseas city who happened to be in the right place at the right time with a smartphone camera, recognized one of the most famous rappers in K-pop, and captured images that showed Changbin in the company of someone whose proximity, body language, and the overall context of the setting made the nature of the relationship unmistakable to anyone viewing the photos without bias. This is where the story takes a turn that separates it from the lower rankings on this list. In the cases of I.N, Lee No, Seungmin, and even Hyunjin and Felix, JYP was dealing with preventable situations, rumors that could be managed, behaviors that could be counseled, patterns that could be disrupted before they became public knowledge. But photographs exist outside the realm of prevention. Once an image exists in digital form, it exists potentially forever. It can be copied, shared, uploaded, screenshotted, archived, and resurrected at any moment by anyone with a grudge, an agenda, or simply a desire for attention. The clock doesn't start ticking when photos are taken, it starts ticking when the company finds out the photos exist, and every second after that is a countdown to potential exposure. JYP's crisis response team, and yes, major K-pop companies have dedicated crisis response protocols that function with military precision, reportedly activated what insiders describe as a containment protocol. The first priority wasn't confronting Changbin. The first priority was identifying the source of the photographs and assessing the threat level. Had the photos been shared publicly? Were they circulating in private group chats? Had they reached any media outlets? Was the person who took them a fan, a random bystander, or someone who might seek financial compensation for their silence? These aren't hypothetical questions, they're the exact calculations that entertainment companies make when photographic evidence of idol dating enters circulation. The Korean entertainment industry has a well-documented history of photo suppression, where companies negotiate directly or indirectly with individuals who possess compromising images to prevent their release. Whether you view this as responsible image management or authoritarian control over human beings' private lives depends entirely on your perspective, but the practice exists, it's widespread. And JYP is widely regarded as one of the most effective companies in the industry at executing it. What reportedly made Changbin's situation particularly tense was the overseas origin of the photographs. Domestically, JYP's legal team has significant leverage. Korean defamation laws are among the strongest in the developed world, and the threat of legal action against someone distributing private photographs of a celebrity without consent is a powerful deterrent. But internationally, different countries, different laws, different cultural attitudes towards celebrity privacy, and critically, different platforms where images could be shared beyond the reach of Korean legal jurisdiction. The company was allegedly operating in a legal and logistical environment they couldn't fully control, and that lack of control, for an organization built on control, was the source of genuine institutional anxiety. When the situation was finally addressed directly with Changbin, after the containment assessment, after the legal evaluation, after the crisis team had mapped every possible scenario, the conversation reportedly took a tone that no other member on this list had experienced. It wasn't a gentle counseling session like I.Ns. It wasn't the respectful but firm image consultation Seungmin received. It wasn't the strategic adjustment approach used with Felix. According to sources, Changbin's meeting involved senior executives, plural, and the conversation centered not just on the immediate situation, but on the existential risk to the group's upcoming activities. At the time, Stray Kids was in the middle of a touring cycle worth hundreds of millions in revenue. Sponsorship deals with global brands were active. Album pre-orders for upcoming releases were already being tracked. The financial exposure created by a confirmed dating scandal involving a core creative member during an active commercial period was quantified in the meeting, not as an abstract threat, but as specific dollar figures representing potential losses. Imagine sitting in a room hearing the monetary value of your personal choices calculated in real time. Imagine being 23 years old, having spent your entire adult life writing music about authenticity, about being true to yourself, about not conforming to systems that try to erase your individuality. And then hearing a room full of executives explain exactly how many millions of dollars your private life could cost if those photographs reached the wrong screen at the wrong time. Number 2, Han, the genius songwriter whose heart nearly tore him apart from the inside. There are members on this list whose stories are defined by external forces, company surveillance, fan investigations, photographic evidence, corporate crisis meetings. But Han Ji-sung's story is different. His story is defined by something no company can monitor, no manager can schedule around, and no PR team can suppress. The war that happens inside a person's own mind when the pressure of living a double life collides with a mental health reality that was already fragile long before any secret relationship entered the picture. Han, born September 14, 2000, raised partially in Malaysia before relocating to South Korea to pursue his dream, is arguably the most creatively gifted member of Stray Kids, and that's saying something in a group overflowing with talent. As one-third of three Ratcha alongside Bang Chan and Changbin, Han doesn't just contribute to Stray Kids' music, he architecturally shapes it. His pen has produced some of the group's most emotionally devastating lyrics, verses that oscillate between raw vulnerability and explosive defiance, with a dexterity that professional songwriters twice his age would envy. He raps with a technical precision that places him among the elite speed rappers in K-pop. He sings with a tone so unexpectedly sweet that it creates a jarring, beautiful contrast against his razor-sharp bars. And he does all of this while carrying a weight that he has been remarkably, almost painfully transparent about, his ongoing battle with anxiety disorder and panic attacks. This is not speculation. This is not rumor. Han himself has spoken publicly, on multiple occasions, about his struggles with mental health. During Stray Kids reality content, during fan meetings, during candid moments on live broadcasts, he has described the paralyzing fear that grips him without warning, the panic attacks that have struck backstage minutes before performances, the periods where the anxiety becomes so overwhelming that basic daily functions feel impossible. In 2022, JYP Entertainment officially announced that Han would be taking a temporary step back from certain activities to prioritize his mental health. A rare acknowledgement from a major K-pop company that one of its top-tier idols was struggling psychologically. That announcement, while praised by international fans as progressive, also revealed the severity of what Han was dealing with. Because JYP doesn't make public statements about idol health unless the situation has escalated beyond what can be managed quietly. Now take that foundation, the anxiety, the panic attacks, the documented mental health struggles that were already severe enough to warrant public corporate acknowledgement, and layer onto it the additional psychological burden of maintaining a secret romantic relationship in an industry that treats such relationships as existential threats. The emotional mathematics of Han's situation are devastating when you lay them out plainly. On one side, the genuine human need for intimate connection, for someone who sees you not as Han from Stray Kids, but as Jisung, just Jisung, a 20-something-year-old kid who writes songs about pain because he knows what pain feels like. On the other side, the crushing awareness that this connection, if discovered, could destroy everything: his career, his group's stability, his members' livelihoods, and the trust of millions of fans who have invested emotionally and financially in a parasocial relationship built on the implicit promise that he belongs, at least symbolically, to them. That's not just stress. That's a psychological pressure cooker operating on a human being whose pressure tolerance was already critically compromised. According to insider accounts that have circulated with unusual consistency across both Korean and international entertainment journalist channels, and the consistency itself lends weight to the narrative. Because fabricated stories typically fragment and contradict across retellings while authentic accounts maintain structural coherence, Han's alleged relationship didn't begin as a dramatic love story. It reportedly began the way most meaningful connections begin for people in their early 20s, gradually, organically, through repeated interactions in a context that felt safe enough to let walls down. The specific details of how and where the connection formed vary across accounts, but the most consistent versions point toward the music industry periphery, someone adjacent to the creative ecosystem that Han operates in. Someone who understood the demands of the industry without being directly in the idol spotlight, someone who could relate to the pressures of artistic life without carrying the specific burden of being a public figure under constant surveillance. This type of connection is particularly dangerous in the K-pop context because it carries a legitimacy that casual encounters don't. This wasn't a fleeting attraction or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was reportedly a genuine emotional bond that developed over time, deepened through shared creative sensibilities, and became an anchor for someone whose internal world was already a turbulent sea of anxiety and self-doubt. And that's precisely what made it so hard for Han to manage, because the relationship wasn't just a want. For someone with his psychological profile, it may have functioned as a need. Mental health professionals who work with high-profile performers have documented the phenomenon extensively for individuals with anxiety disorders, particularly those operating in high-pressure environments with limited personal autonomy. Stable, intimate relationships often serve as critical emotional regulation mechanisms. The presence of a trusted partner who provides unconditional acceptance can function as a psychological anchor, reducing baseline anxiety levels and providing a safe space for emotional processing that no therapist, no group mate, and no fan interaction can fully replicate. Which means that when JYP eventually became aware of the situation, and they did, the company wasn't just dealing with a dating policy violation. They were potentially dealing with a mental health intervention disguised as a corporate directive. And according to sources, this is exactly where the situation became agonizingly complicated. The way JYP reportedly discovered Han's connection wasn't through the external channels that flagged other members, not fans, not staff observations, not photographs. It was allegedly through the members themselves. And this is where Han's story diverges sharply from every other ranking on this list, because it introduces a dimension that transforms this from a company versus idol narrative into a brotherhood story with genuine emotional stakes. The accounts suggest that Han, burdened by the psychological weight of maintaining secrecy while simultaneously battling his anxiety, eventually confided in one or more of his group mates. Not as a strategic decision, but as an emotional necessity, the kind of confession that happens at 3 in the morning when the walls are closing in and the only people who might understand are the ones sleeping in the rooms next to yours. The members who allegedly learned about Han's situation were reportedly faced with an impossible dilemma: loyalty to their brother versus responsibility to their group. Because in Stray Kids, the bond between members isn't performative. It's been tested by elimination rounds, hiatus periods, public scandals, and the relentless pressure of operating at the highest level of global entertainment. These 8 men have been through more together by their mid-20s than most people experience in a lifetime. And now some of them were carrying a secret that, if mishandled, could bring consequences raining down on all of them. The internal tension reportedly became visible, not to the public, but to the management and production staff who work with Stray Kids daily. Subtle shifts in group dynamics during recording sessions. Moments of unusual silence during van rides between schedules. A protective energy around Han that went beyond the normal group care they'd always shown toward his mental health. Something had changed, and the people whose job it was to notice changes noticed. When the situation was eventually surfaced to management, whether through staff observation, a concerned member's indirect disclosure, or the company's own internal detection, JYP reportedly faced the most delicate handling challenge of any case on this list. Because this wasn't just about image protection or commercial risk calculation. This was about a member whose documented mental health condition was inextricably intertwined with the very relationship the company needed to address. Push too hard, and you risk triggering a mental health crisis in one of your most valuable creative assets. Push too softly, and you set a precedent that other members could interpret as selective enforcement of dating policies based on psychological vulnerability. The solution JYP allegedly implemented reveals more about the company's institutional intelligence than any other case on this list. Rather than a direct confrontation or a formal meeting, Han was reportedly guided into an extended conversation framed entirely around his mental health. A conversation in which the relationship was addressed not as a rule violation, but as an additional stressor that the company's support system needed to account for. Number 1. Bang Chan, the leader who looked JYP in the eyes and made a choice that changed everything. This is it. The top of the list. The story that every other ranking has been building toward, layer by layer, member by member, like a symphony that's been gathering instruments one at a time and is finally ready to unleash its full crescendo. And at the center of this final movement stands Christopher Bang Chan, born October 3, 1997, in Sydney, Australia, the leader of Stray Kids, the architect of their sound, the guardian of their brotherhood, and the man who carried more weight on his shoulders before the age of 25 than most entertainment executives accumulate in entire careers. To understand why Bang Chan's story sits alone at the pinnacle of this list, You first have to understand what Bang Chan is to JYP Entertainment, not just what he does, but what he represents within the corporate mythology of the company. Chan entered JYP as a trainee in 2010. He was 13 years old. A kid from Sydney who barely spoke Korean, who left his family on the other side of the planet, who walked into one of the most competitive training systems in the global entertainment industry with nothing but raw talent and an almost irrational belief that this was his destiny. And then he waited. Not for a year. Not for 2. For 7 years. 7 years of training, of watching other trainees debut while he remained in the practice rooms, of being considered for project after project only to be passed over, of questioning whether the sacrifice, his childhood, his family, his normal life, was worth the dream that kept getting pushed further and further into the future. 7 years in the JYP system means 7 years of direct exposure to Park Jinyoung's philosophy, 7 years of absorbing the company's values, 7 years of understanding exactly how the machine works from the inside. By the time Stray Kids finally debuted in 2018, Bang Chan wasn't just a trained idol, he was a JYP product in the deepest sense of the word. He understood the company's DNA because it had been woven into his own over nearly a decade. And that's what made his alleged situation so personally significant to Park Jinyoung himself, because Chan wasn't just another idol who broke a rule. He was, in many ways, JYP's most personal investment. The one he'd watched grow from a child into a man. The one he'd entrusted with the leadership of a group that would go on to become one of the biggest acts in global music. The one who was supposed to be the embodiment of everything JYP's training philosophy could produce. Disciplined, loyal, selfless, and above all, devoted to the group above personal desire. When that investment shows a crack, it doesn't feel like a policy violation. It feels like betrayal. And according to the most consistent and detailed insider accounts surrounding Stray Kids' internal dynamics, accounts that have persisted across years and multiple independent sources within the Korean entertainment journalist community, Bang Chan's alleged romantic situation didn't just trigger a corporate response. It triggered a personal one. From Park Jinyoung himself. Let's talk about what makes Chan's position uniquely impossible compared to every other member on this list. As the leader of Stray Kids, Chan operates under a leadership covenant that extends far beyond musical direction or stage coordination. He is the emotional center of the group, the member who stays up until 4 in the morning producing tracks in his studio, not because he has to, but because he carries the creative vision of the group as a personal responsibility. He is the crisis manager, the member who held the group together during Hyunjin's hiatus, who supported Han through his mental health struggles, who maintained group cohesion during every controversy and challenge the group faced. He is the fan liaison, his legendary Chan's Room V-Live series, where he sits alone late at night talking to Stay about music, about life, about emotions, has become one of the most intimate and beloved idol fan connection points in K-pop history. In those broadcasts, Chan doesn't perform. He exists. He shares playlists, tells stories, laughs quietly, sometimes falls silent in ways that make millions of viewers feel like they're sitting across from a friend rather than watching a celebrity content stream. That level of perceived intimacy is commercial gold, and it's built entirely on the implicit promise that Chan's emotional availability belongs to Stay. Now imagine what happens when the person who is everything to everyone, leader to his members, creative engine to the company, emotional anchor to the fans, is discovered to have reserved a part of himself for someone outside that triangle. Not a large part. Not a public part. But a part nonetheless. A private corner of his life where Christopher Bang exists instead of Bang Chan, where the weight of leadership is lifted, where the 7 years of training and the relentless pressure of global stardom can be set down, even temporarily. In the presence of someone who asks nothing of him except to be present. The details of how JYP allegedly became aware of Chan's situation carry a narrative gravity that no other member's story approaches. Unlike the external discoveries, fan investigations, staff observations, civilian photographs, Chan's situation reportedly became known through a channel that strikes at the very heart of the trust relationship between an idol leader and his company. According to multiple aligned accounts, the discovery was connected to Chan's studio sessions, the late-night production work that has become synonymous with his identity. Chan is known for spending extraordinary hours in JYP studios, often working through the night on tracks for Stray Kids and other projects. This schedule gave him a legitimate reason to be in the company building at unusual hours, a reason that was never questioned because his work output validated the time spent. But the studios are company property. The building has security systems. Entry and exit logs exist. And over time, a pattern allegedly emerged that didn't align with production output, sessions logged in the system that didn't correspond with new demos, tracks, or project updates. Hours spent in the building that produced no audible creative work. A studio that was occupied according to the security logs, but silent according to the hallway. The disconnect between logged studio time and actual creative output reportedly triggered an inquiry that was initially framed as a resource management concern. Was Chan overworking himself to the point of diminishing returns? Did he need schedule adjustments to protect his health? The concern was genuine at first, rooted in the company's very real interest in preserving the well-being of their most important creative asset. But as the inquiry deepened, the picture that emerged was allegedly very different from burnout. Chan had reportedly been using the studio, his sanctuary, his creative home, the place most associated with his identity as an artist and leader, as a private space for personal connection. Whether this involved in-person meetings or extended private communications during those logged hours varies across accounts, but the core allegation remains consistent. The leader of Stray Kids had found a way to carve out personal time within the company's own walls, using his unquestioned work ethic and legendary studio dedication as cover. The genius of it, and it was genius in the strategic sense, was that Chan's cover story was his actual identity. Nobody questions Bang Chan being in the studio at 2 a.m. because Bang Chan being in the studio at 2 a.m. is the most natural thing in the world. He'd built such an unassailable reputation for tireless creative work that the very behavior designed to hide his personal life was indistinguishable from the behavior that defined his professional life. When the realization crystallized within JYP's management structure, the response reportedly bypassed every normal protocol. This didn't go through team managers. It didn't filter through division heads. It didn't follow the hierarchical chain of command that handled other members' situations. According to sources, Park Jinyoung, JYP himself, became directly involved. And this is the moment that separates Bang Chan's story from every other ranking on this list by a margin so wide it might as well be an ocean. So there it is. 8 members. 8 stories. 8 windows into the invisible architecture of control, sacrifice, and survival that operates behind the dazzling surface of K-pop's biggest stages. From I.N's quiet counseling session, the gentle reminder that even the youngest, most obedient idol is never truly free from the company's gaze, to Lee No's masterful art of disappearing. A man so skilled at protecting his privacy that even JYP's systems couldn't fully track him. From Hyunjin's heartbreaking discovery that even his paintings, his most authentic form of self-expression, could become surveillance evidence, to Seungmin's devastating realization that the golden boy image he'd spent years cultivating was a cage as much as it was a crown. Felix taught us that love doesn't respect borders, time zones, or corporate jurisdictions, and that the most painful kind of distance isn't geographical. It's the distance between who you're allowed to be and who you actually are. See you next time, stay.